I would, especially if we were doing shows, show versus shows. I would put Stink and I up against anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
So I got another question for you because I threw it to DMAC. I'm not trying to just compare you guys. When are we getting a new stadium?
Oh God, I hope so. I hope soon. Do you understand that most of talk radio is just simply stealing from other people?
Mr. Mike Evans of The Fan, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing, sir?
My pleasure. Should be fun. Looking forward to it.
No, absolutely. I got some sports questions for you, some other questions. But how you've been doing radio in Denver for how many years now?
25. Coming up on my
Really?
25th anniversary at the Fan here in just about a month.
That's something to be said. Like radio talent at radio stations is like usually like a 3 to 4 year lifespan sometimes.
Well, it's funny. I grew up in New England, and I grew up listening to a powerhouse radio station back there called WBZ. And it was funny because I was always interested in being able to wake up in the morning and hear the sports and hear the news and all that kind of stuff. And it always struck me that the news guy, the morning show host, the sports guy, they'd all been there at that station for like 20, 25, 30 years. And it always stuck with me the idea that, wow, this is somebody I've been listening to for a long time. They're a huge part of the community. Everybody knows them. They have a following. And that sounds kind of cool. I always wanted to do that. It's why I never wanted to jump around to different markets and just go market jumping. I wanted to get to a place where I felt like it was home and just kind of put down radio roots there.
No, that makes sense. And like 25 years ago in Denver, Denver wasn't probably the biggest media market. I mean, it's grown quite a bit, obviously, over the last decade, but 20 years ago, it was not what it is today.
No, although it was still a pretty good market at that point. I know when I was in Dallas at the time doing some national radio for the now defunct Prime Sports Radio, and they went belly up, and so I was looking where to go next, and a guy who I had known as a program director in Seattle, he had left to become his own radio consultant. In fact, he still consults for the Fan today.
Oh, wow.
And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm looking to move around. And he said, what do you think of Denver? And immediately I was like, ooh, that sounds good, because having grown up in New England, lived in Dallas, I kind of missed, I missed the seasons, and I missed the variety of weather and everything like that. And I always was intrigued by Denver and always respected it as a sports market, a sports town. And it didn't take long. It's funny because I had just, once I knew that I was going to be getting the job here, it still took a couple months to kind of work everything out, but I had started to read the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News online, and it didn't take long reading the Woody Pages, the Jim Armstrongs, the Dave Kriegers, the Mark Kislas of the world to realize, hey, this is a no joke sports market. They take their sports seriously here, and I was looking forward to it, and it's never disappointed from the moment I got here.
No, that's great. That's awesome. 25 years in one market is something to be said. That's for sure. And so you've been doing radio for a while. So you have this, like listening to your morning show, you have like an art of persuasion because you deal with some pretty opinionated people.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and you have to persuade them, not just, your fellow coworkers and fellow air talents, but also the listener. So what do you think of when you're going, hey, I'm trying to persuade? What's the art you use for that? What are you trying to get across?
Well, first of all, you have to be informed. You just can't go off half-cocked, talking about whatever your opinion's got to be. It's got to be based in something that is legit. And I don't mind being a contrarian. I'll let you in on a little secret. There have been times over the years where I've said things I don't necessarily believe. In order to try to help facilitate a conversation. I just like to call it playing devil's advocate. But most of the time, my opinions are my opinions. And I don't mind going out there on a precarious limb. For me, the rule's always been, look, I don't mind saying something that might not be popular. I don't mind saying something that might be viewed as wrong. All I need is about, knowing that maybe 3 out of every 10 people listening are going, yeah, I think he's making a good point. I don't need to have the majority behind me to continue to go ahead with that take. But it just can't be outlandish, It's got to have something. But as far as
It can't be a stat padding take.
right, right. Good point. Yeah, yeah. Touche. No, I think then once the art of persuasion is you got to have a working understanding of what you're talking about. You got to have some solid footing to base it on, and then I think it is honestly it's just sold through energy and passion and enthusiasm, and I think that is something that comes through to the listener. That if I sound energetic and passionate about it, then hey, you know what? Sounds like he believes it. And you know what? He's making a point that he seems to believe strongly in. You know what? As I listen to it, okay, I can see where he's going with that, and I agree with him. Or I don't agree with him. And he's making such a energetic argument that it makes me not agree with him even more. So, I think it's a combination of that, but you have to bring the energy. One thing I've noticed over the years is that the shows that I like listening to, I think the shows that I've been part of that have been most successful, there's an energy, there's a flow, there's a rhythm to it that you hope becomes contagious for the listener, because really what you're trying to do is, especially in the mornings, hey, I got you in the car, I got you listening maybe for, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 minutes. I got to make those minutes count. And so my goal is to create an up-tempo enough dialogue, whatever we're talking about, if it's sports or if it's just goofing around. I want it to be up-tempo enough that you all of a sudden find yourself, oh, wow, that 20-minute ride is over. And I'm where I need to be. And thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow.
So what a great compliment for you to be like, hey, I was listening and I missed my exit.
Right. Or I got to work and you weren't done yet, and I ended up sitting in the parking lot in my car for another 5 minutes because you guys had me laughing or you had me engaged in the argument, and I waited about 5 minutes. Those are the ultimate compliments. When somebody says, man, I got to work and I still had to see how this thing all finished out before I could go in, that's the best compliment you can get.
And then you just tease them just enough before they're going into work, like, oh, I'll have to go download the rest of it later.
Right, exactly.
So going into more of the sports world, one of the questions I've been noodling on recently, and you guys talk about it, especially with the Broncos, and did they pay too much for Payton and Russell Wilson, the coach and the quarterback? Mm-hmm. So the first question to sort of set the bar is like, where do you value those in an organization? Because you can't say you paid too much unless you know what the value is.
Right. Well, they made a mistake in the value of Russell Wilson. I'm not going to come on here and I'm not going to give you some Monday morning armchair quarterback saying that they should not have made the trade. Look, I don't care what people tell you. We were there. We were all there as fans, media types. It was unbridled optimism, unbridled excitement. The idea that Russell Wilson was coming here. And so let's not kid ourselves. Nobody blinked at the asking price, what they had to give up. All our answers were all our prayers were answered. We were ready to go. The issue was, and when some of the reports started to come out of Seattle about, the guy's a bit of a diva and he had to do this and understand Denver that this is what you're signing up for. There was that element of, boy, what do they know that we don't know, right? And it gave you a little pause. But the only reason I had any pause about it was they still had 2 years left on his contract, right? 2 years left on his contract. And I thought that was a really enviable position to be in, because even though you suspect that you were getting the answer to your prayers, you didn't have to officially commit to him yet. And you still had those 2 years to see how it played out. So I was a lone wolf. I was the only guy on the station saying, hey, you don't need to pay him right away. And I was shouted down as, hey, you made this investment. You gave up all this. You got to follow through with the contract. And who cares what he wants? Give him more money than Deshaun Watson. I literally had people at our station saying, just give him $300 million guaranteed. $300 million guaranteed? Deshaun Watson's $230. The Baltimore Ravens and the rest of the NFL owners are colluding that they don't even want to go near that with Lamar Jackson. And people offhandedly here were saying, just give him that money. Make him the highest paid guy. And
It's easy when it's not your money. Like, yeah, just pay him.
exactly. But I just didn't feel like you had to. And that was proven right after a year that Russell Wilson had. Boy, would you love right now to be sitting here if I could tell everybody, yeah, you gave up what you gave up for Russell, but you didn't give up the contract. And you'd be going into this last year of the contract where he'd have to really make good in order to go earn his money. So that was the only thing. But I had no problem with the value. I had no problem giving up what they gave up. I wouldn't have paid him right away. But once the Sean Payton thing, and honestly, I don't link the Sean Payton hiring with Russell Wilson. I know it's been suggested that Sean Payton was hired to fix Russell Wilson. No, he wasn't. He was hired to fix the Broncos and to take this 6-7 year tailspin that we've been on and fix that. And that's what you're hiring. That's the track record. That's the resume that you're hiring. And yeah, certainly his first order of business is to try to fix Russ. Try to fix Russ. That's job number one and year number one. But guess what? If he doesn't fix Russ, you can move on from Russ, but guess who's still going to be here? Sean Payton. So you hired Payton to fix the Broncos, and if along the way, fixing the Broncos, he can fix Russell Wilson, great. But if he can't, oh well, move on.
So let's just say they have to move on, they'll play the hypothetical game. They get their draft picks back in the next draft in the 2024. I'm sure they've traded or moved some of them. I'm not exactly sure the details. What's your quarterback strategy? I know you've talked about it quite a bit, but what would you say Russell Wilson's released, moved from the Broncos, traded, whatever the situation? If you're the GM of the Broncos going into next year, or at least an advisor to Sean Payton and Payton. I can't too many Paytons in
Too many Paytons. Too many Paytons. Thank goodness Peyton Manning's not involved, or Peyton Hillis. There's just too many Paytons. But
right.
My philosophy is this, and I believe that you should be in the market drafting a young quarterback every single year. You should become a quarterback development factory until you find the guy. But where you draft these guys is where I part company with a lot of people. I think that a herd mentality is taken over the NFL, where teams are so desperate when it comes to the quarterback position. Quite frankly, I think they just overdraft quarterbacks. I think quarterbacks who should be going in the second round, who I know have second-round grades, are getting taken high up in the first round. And basically what teams are doing is they're taking all these concerns, all these red flags, all the evaluation of their scouts that make this quarterback really a second-round pick or a late first-round pick, and they're picking him high up in the first round because why? We need a quarterback. And I think what you've seen is an overdrafting of quarterbacks. I think the numbers bear it out, that for every Joe Burrow, there are 5 Carson Wentz's, Jared Goff's, Baker Mayfield's, Sam Darnold's. It's basically a 20% 1 in 5 hit rate when you're talking about drafting quarterbacks in the top 10. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know anybody out there watching this. What key life-changing, life-altering decision do you make in your lives based on a 20% success rate? You don't. And so I think the better way to do it is hire a good coach, hire a good general manager, put together a staff of smart football people, and then you know what you do? You go find your Dak Prescott. You go find your Russell Wilson. You go find your Jalen Hurts. You find quarterbacks that you understand might have a few rough edges, might be developmental quarterbacks. You're going to have a certain amount of luck to see it work out, but at least you're drafting them where they should be drafted. And I always kind of cringe at the idea that, well, if you take a quarterback in the second or third round, you're just hoping to get lucky. And you're not hoping to get lucky when you draft a quarterback high up in the first round? I just referenced 5 quarterbacks. I could keep going with a dozen more easily of quarterbacks who were taken high who failed. You don't think that those organizations realized quickly that, hey, we got to develop this guy, and we got to hope, and we got to pray that we get lucky with this guy. So it's the same thing, honestly. I just think that I'd rather be drafting and developing guys in spots where they deserve to be drafted rather than overdrafting guys that have a success rate that, quite frankly, isn't that good.
There's a few things I'll pick apart there. I agree with you in premise, like 'cause like the players have value, and if you when you overpay for things, whether it's overdraft or you buy a house that's overvalued in life, you're gonna find some issues down the road if you got to make a quicker decision right afterwards if something's not working out. So I agree with premise with the value, but what's the if a first round draft pick, first off, like what's the definition of success? Like I would argue Carson Wentz was an okay quarterback when you use him. Is he someone that you're like as a franchise quarterback? Clearly not. He's moved around, but he's like is he someone you're going like, it's like more of a C grade than an F grade, maybe a C plus because he got a Super Bowl somehow. Who knows? But
Well, he wasn't the quarterback of record in that Super Bowl.
But he got him.
Nick Foles was.
That's like saying what's his name when Manning was out for a little bit. Brock Osweiler didn't help him get to the Super Bowl. He was a part of the team. He got him there. He played his role well. And so, but then like, what's the failure rate of other draft picks? Like, just because you're the top 10 picks, like Bradley Chubb's a great anomaly in that just of injury and things like that. You go. Obviously, there's the whole like, well, we should have drafted a quarterback there. Well, it's always fun to say that, but it's hindsight. So it's not hindsight's 2020. I call it 50-50. Or they say it's 50-50. I go, it's 2020. Things are clearer now.
Uh-huh.
You can see you have better vision on things. So, what would you like? Do you have the numbers or any ideas in ballpark? I'm not asking for like hard stats. Like, then what's the failure rate? Like, as they get drafted farther in the draft.
Yep.
I know basketball more. I know NBA players get drafted in the second round. They have like a less than a 50% chance of making the team.
Mm-hmm. The whole idea of value. It's a fair point. It's one I've had tossed back at me before. First of all, the draft itself. I don't care whether you're talking about quarterbacks, defensive ends. The draft itself, and understand. The collective we, have made the draft into a monster, right? It's a monster. Okay, but let's be honest. The reason it started out was because ESPN was dying for programming, and they put the draft on TV because it filled up an entire weekend of programming. Well, lo and behold, it became a big deal, and it became a cottage industry for people. The great
especially
Cecil,
for us fantasy football people.
yeah, and the great Cecil Lammy at our station. I mean, it's people have been able to make a career out of talking about, promoting, studying, analyzing, mock drafting the draft. But at its core, it's still a 50-50 proposition. It just is. Look at the numbers. Look at the amount of players that are drafted and the amount of players that actually go on to have NFL careers, never mind go on to have real above average NFL careers. So when you're talking about the value, okay, so yeah, I recognize the value of the quarterback position, but I still come back to the idea that if I'm going to have my scouts, and I'm as a general manager, I'm going to put in months and months and millions of dollars of resources to put together my evaluations, it still comes down to the idea that if I'm going to miss on a first-round pick, at least I know that it was a first-round pick, that it was somebody that I had graded as a first-rounder instead of overvaluing, overdrafting a quarterback who I know had a second-round pick, but I took him high up in the first round because why? Because we need a quarterback, supposedly. And that's the kind of stuff that I just can't really stomach is you're taking something that's a risky 50-50 proposition anyway, and now I think you're further reducing those odds because you're taking a player where he shouldn't be taken, certainly not commensurate with the work and the preparation that you've put in. And whenever I hear somebody say, well, the value of the quarterback is so important. Well, I'm not great at math, but here's what I know about math. I can take 5 times 0. I can take 1 billion times 0. You can give me the biggest value you want to put on a number, but you put it up against 0, and what are you left with? 0. And I think that that's a lot of what we see with these quarterbacks. Hey, we took this quarterback. We need to take this quarterback because it's so important. Well, great. You're attaching a certain value to this quarterback position, but you picked a guy who's a bust. So I don't care how much value you placed on it. If the guy can't play, what is it still? A 0.
It's an interesting thought with the value. Like, you know more about this than I do. Is there any truth? I've heard the rumors is that the Broncos, at least for years, did not have the number of scouts and maybe the evaluators that equivalent to other teams in their position. Is that
the John Elway staff was below average in terms of numbers compared to a lot of other franchises. Yes, in terms of scouts and everything like that. Yes.
Because that had to be. I'm curious where you see where that ripples into the team and to the metrics of how good they could be, is because they had misevaluated players.
Well, not only did they misevaluate players, Paxton Lynch is a shining example of that. Not only did they misevaluate, but then they let that first misevaluation sort of steamroll and become an app, because then it impacted the next one. So, like, yeah, should they have taken Josh Allen? Absolutely. Okay, with the benefit of 50-50, 20-20 hindsight, should they have taken Josh Allen? Absolutely. Part of the reason why they didn't take Josh Allen, I think they were scared off by Josh Allen, was because they had just had the fresh memory of blowing it with Paxton Lynch, and they looked at Josh Allen as another smaller school, tall, big-armed, kind of inaccurate. He was down at the Senior Bowl, and he's airmailing balls all over the place, and people are like, this guy can't. And I know because we had this discussion on the Fan for a couple of weeks. Believe me, we completely, as a station, vetted Josh Allen. And the overwhelming consensus was, he was a barely 50%, little over 50% completion percentage in college. We did our research. Very few college quarterbacks who had that kind of completion percentage improved dramatically once they got to the NFL. To his credit, the guy is legit. The guy proved a lot of critics wrong. But you got to remember where we were at that moment. And the Josh Allen bandwagon was pretty empty at that time. And a lot of it was because of what had happened with Paxton Lynch. So that's an example that when, as an organization, you make a mistake, how those mistakes have long, long lasting ramifications.
It's amazing how that works in like professional sports and in business too. You make a mistake on a hire and then they're afraid to make, a similar hire, even though it's, I always joke, it's like people want to make it a single variable equation. My dad's an engineer or was an engineer, so I get it honestly. So people want to make things single variable when there's multi-level variables, especially when you're talking about value of a football player in the draft. There's guys that just go out there and play, but they can't win the underwear Olympics. So it's just, you have to, that's where like the room of small evaluators and not the numbers or the investment in that with the Broncos you can probably see the ripple effect years later where it's, you're expecting guys to be on the team at least 3+ years later. Like you're still, we're just getting out of that tide that drafted those players.
And you got to be careful because, all right, Buffalo's got Josh Allen right now, but how long were they down before they got to him? How many?
I'm a Dolphin fan, so I'm going to guess near Jim Kelly era. Since
all right, as a Dolphin, same question. How many quarterbacks did they go through chasing that next guy? And I just think that Cincinnati finally got Joe Burrow. How long were they down? Look at Cleveland. It got they went through so many quarterbacks. Finally, it got to the point where they had to go completely rogue and make a deal for and give a contract to Deshaun Watson that the rest of the NFL owners despise, to the point where now we have collusion to tamp down Lamar Jackson's value because they don't want anybody to be paid more than Deshaun Watson because they hate that contract. So it's why we here as fans, we live in the moment and we want to immediately address the mistakes that have been made prior. And so that, I think, sometimes leads to that feeling of desperation. All right, the mock draft guys say that this is a quarterback that should go in the top 5. We got to draft one. And it doesn't matter who it is. Draft any one of them. We just got to draft one. Well, yeah, you can get lucky, or you could be the Jets, where you did it with Sam Darnold. You did it with Zach Wilson. And now you're prepared to pay for a short-term rental with Aaron Rodgers with the understanding that once that's over, you're going to be right back into that mix again. So I know what I'm preaching here is more of a long-term view that sort of flies counter with how fans view things. But one of the reasons why I like the idea of Sean Payton is that this figures to be a guy that's going to be here for a while. He can put an actual plan in place, and he's not burdened by what's happened here before. Hey, man, I wasn't here when all that stuff went down. I'm going to do things the way I want to do it. And I'm hoping that means that it'll be a well thought out approach to not only team building, roster building, but also quarterback development. And yeah, it'd be great if Russell Wilson can be fixed. But let's say he can't be fixed. Well, then what do you do? And it goes back to the question you asked me. If you have to move on from Russell Wilson, I want the Broncos to get into the quarterback development business and understand that, you can still find your long-term answer doing it that way without having to overdraft for a guy that, might end up being the next big thing, but statistically won't.
So my guess is you're more of a dividend guy in your portfolio more than buying lotto tickets and Bitcoin.
Correct.
You want the calm, steady
I take the
growth.
long view. Long view. I'm not interested in blips. I take the long view.
You're not going no, I'm not going to get the scratcher. I'm going to put my money. I'm going to get a AT&T or Verizon and just enjoy the 7%.
Exactly.
So yeah, that makes sense from how you look at it. Because then you have guys going, but I want to invest in Tesla. I want to invest in something I can go sell it and redo my kitchen.
Now, and listen. Sometimes a quarterback prospect will come along that you can look at and say, okay, this feels like as sure of a sure thing as you're going to find, right? An Andrew Luck, a Trevor Lawrence type, Caleb Williams certainly seems to be that type. Hey, look, if you're somebody as a football fan or you're an organization and you plant your flag and say, I like that guy, then I can live with that. I honestly can. What drives me crazy is the notion that, well, you got to love more than one guy. You gotta be able to look at 3 or 4 quarterbacks and you got to place an equal value on all of them. And you got to be prepared to take any one of them. Well, who do you like? Any one of them. What do you mean, any one of them?
Well, I think that can be true. It's like if you ever went to go buy a car, you're like, I like multiple ones, but then when you start, what's available when you go walk back on the lot? Well, someone might have bought, one of the 3 that you might have liked. But
if you think about it though, if you have the time and the ability to actually go out and really do your due diligence with a car, what are you going to likely do as a car buyer? You're going to start out with a pool of about 3 or 4 cars, right? That you kind of all like, but eventually, whether it's test drives, market reports, research, talking to mechanics, whatever, you're going to settle on one. Correct?
Well, you have to eventually. Unless there's, we both probably have people in our lives that can settle with 2 or 3 if they really want to. But it's what you value in a car, because if we were all practical people, we'd all be driving Honda Civics. But people buy with emotion and, intangibles that they like. They want the sunroof. They want the GPS guided system. They want all the bells and whistles on it. They want the heated steering wheel in North Carolina, which is amazing why you'd want that. A few days a week or a year you could use that. But people buy that because it makes them feel good. And there's a part with the quarterback, it's like, well, what do you value? I think that's the question, like part of it with Lamar Jackson right now that you were bringing up, is obviously there's some contract issues, but there's also that you bring in a Lamar Jackson, you got to change how you operate your offense. Right. He's not as plug and play as other players are. There's a big investment that has to go into him outside of his contract. Now, we need different offensive linemen potentially, a different running style, different receivers, all these things.
Which is why you can't place an equal value on Lamar Jackson and Sam Darnold.
No.
Right? You can't just say pick one of them. No, you can't, because as you correctly pointed out, they're stylistically, they're so different.
I'm a basketball guy, so I'll bring it back. Like when they go, who's the greatest player of all time, LeBron or Michael? I grew up watching Michael. I'm from Ohio. I left Ohio for less money too. I can relate to LeBron on that. So
you took your talents where?
Originally North Carolina, now to Denver. But it's like, but it's one of those where you kind of go, I get, it's just like, what do you value? If you like the Magic style of basketball, the passing, LeBron looks like a great player, and he is. He's got statistically great things, but if you value winning in championships, so it depends, like going back to the quarterback, it's what do you value in the quarterback and what are the intangibles? And I think in Denver, we've been pretty spoiled over the years. Mm-hmm. Green Bay's about ready to have they're going to have another get spoiled for another decade, or they're going to start going through what most franchises go through every few years. So it's interesting. I got a more of a a random radio question. Do you have a few more minutes? I've taken a lot of your time. I
Oh
want
yeah,
to.
no, go ahead. Let's keep going.
Okay, perfect. So, one of the things that cracks me up in radio, because I worked in radio, and yeah, we have the Underwear Olympics going on for the draft, and other. So it's like, have you ever done like radio Olympics for your staff, for people on the in the station? And I got an idea to run by you, and this is
Okay.
free. You
Yeah.
can use it.
Believe me, hey, do you understand that most of talk radio is just simply stealing from other people?
I got a book about the art
Yeah.
of stealing.
Yeah.
It's, absolutely. I steal ideas all the time, and so. But I have a suggestion what you guys can do for an event, and I'm sure you can bring in guys like Dr. David Bruton to help train you guys and stuff like that, or if someone gets hurt to fix you guys. But the idea would be is to have a fan combine, and so we'd have the hosts of the stations, like how quickly can you leave the studio, voice a 30-second spot, dodge a sales guy, get something from the vending machine, and get back before the commercial break is over.
Can I already tell you who's going to win?
Who's going to win?
Who do you think? I'll give you a couple guesses. Which fan host?
I'm going to go host, not including the. I'm considering like the host, not the athletes.
Nope.
Is
Nope. Add in the former athletes too.
I would say just on the host side, the first thought I'd want to say is Zach By because he's probably more athletic, but I feel like he can get distracted easily if someone
Zach
comes up
is
with
very
that.
distracting. Zach he'd be going down the hallway with the intent of doing this and this and that, and then somebody would go squirrel, and he'd be like lost.
Yeah, so that's why all of a
him.
sudden the clock would hit and be like, wait, I didn't even get my snack yet. Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and but
For me, it would be me. Okay,
You think it'd be
me.
you?
I'm the most practical, sober pro at the
'Cause
radio
you-
station.
I could see that because you do in mornings, so you got to wake up at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning. You have to be more disciplined.
Yeah, you have to have discipline. You have to be able to have your routines. You don't deviate from your routines. You have to have a certain single-minded focus when you work early mornings. So that would be me from the jocks, the pro radio guy. Who do you think among the ex-athletes is the best use of time?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm like once again, I'm going to take the Stokely group out of there. I just think once again, like that's a squirrel show, right?
Pew pew pew, that kind of thing. Yeah.
See, because like here's what I expect you to do in something like that. If you know they're running the event, you'd go some like a golf guy in the hallway, be like, "Hey, Stokely's walking through. Just say something about golf," and he'd be
Exactly. You got him. You got him.
yeah.
But
Like, hey,
Schlereth. I have seen Schlereth in breaks and we're talking like 3-minute, 4-minute breaks. This guy will go print something, go to the bathroom, and I'm not talking about just go to the bathroom. I'm talking about go to the bathroom, brew coffee, get his coffee ready, and say hi to the Murphy Houston down the hallway, and do it all in like 3.5 minutes. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. The guy is the most compartmentalized, stay on task guy I've ever been around.
see, I was going to guess Derek Wolf because no one would just want to get in his way.
Yeah, no, that's one intimidating SOB right there. I haven't honestly since Derek started. Our paths just haven't crossed yet, and that's
Really?
fine with me because he's very intimidating. Very intimidating.
No, so I would be. It'd be an interesting office Olympics. Like who can get to the vending. Like the other things, I don't know how your building's set up. What if the vending machine is a flight down the stairs? Who's gonna pull an Achilles trying to go up those stairs?
No, I would, especially if we were doing shows, show versus shows. I would put Stink and I up against anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So I got another question for you because I threw it to DMAC. I'm not trying to just compare you guys, but I think it's a fun question.
Yeah.
Especially in the broader view of the Broncos is when are we getting a new stadium?
Oh, God, I hope so. I hope soon. And when I say soon, like within the next decade, I understand that these things take time, but I would love the plans to be put in place over the next 5 years so that 7-8 years from now, we've got shovels in the ground. Because I got lucky enough to go to March Madness when it was here in Denver. And I went to the Friday games, the 11:30 and 2:30 games. And the place was already banged out.
The tickets were expensive for that. I actually looked at those.
It was expensive. But
my wife and I looked at those. I'm like, that's a lot of wings and pizza.
Yeah, but the people were there. And I think that Denver was one of only 2 first and second round sites that had sellouts, that had over 19,000 people. And
Wow.
if you've been to March Madness in Denver over the years, it's always done well. It's always done well. So it was a reminder to me that this is the kind of city, Denver is a city that should be in the rotation for all the big events. We should be in the rotation for the Final Four, for Super Bowls, for giant UFC things. Just take the biggest events that are out there. Denver should be in the rotation. So in order to do that, you have to build a stadium, a retractable roof. I never want a dome because I know that there are still some die-in-the-wool Bronco fans, especially, who believe the game should be played outside. Fine. I don't want to take that away from you.
I'll take that away. I'll take that away from us.
Well, you know what? Having been at that Baltimore playoff game when it was just absolutely frigid, I'm sorry. First of all, that weather and having to play that game outside cost the Denver Broncos the Super Bowl. That team was so loaded, but it was a Peyton Manning-led team. And you can't have Peyton Manning doing his magic out there with a wind chill that's 15 below. It's just not going to happen. You play that game if you have the option, and the forecast is what the forecast is going to be, and it's going to be bitterly cold, and you can just turn that wheel and close the roof, and you play that game in a climate-controlled environment. First of all, I promise you, all the fans that were there that night, if you're watching this right now, you'll agree with me. You would have rather been inside. And the Broncos would have won that game, and they would have gone on to win the Super Bowl. So I'm all in favor of let's build a brand new stadium. Let's put a retractable roof over it. Let's get all the major sporting events here. And we don't need to do it with public money. We've got big pockets ownership now. Let them pay for it. We'll throw in a few dollars for infrastructure. There's no reason why you can't get it done. And I'd love to build a big entertainment complex around it. Restaurants, hotels, shops, make it an event place, because what we have right now with that stadium is just bleh. It's got to be revitalized. So yeah.
So you put it somewhere out in the suburbs somewhere. You wouldn't
I don't
put it
care.
in.
I don't care. Put it up by the airport. Who cares? I really truly don't care. So as a long answer to your short question, yes, I desperately hope that we get a big time stadium within the next decade.
Okay, well, I got a bet with DMAC that we'll hear about it in about the next 2 years.
Plans have started to be made?
Yeah, because here's what I've learned with the new ownership with the whatever ownership name.
Walton Penner Group.
Walton Penner. I was going to call him Payton again. It's everyone's Payton. So they're really tight-lipped.
Yeah.
Like the guy's a CFO. He's not a hey, I want the limelight on me guy. So it's like we didn't hear much with the coaching. I'm going to take a guess that they do the same thing. They keep everything tight-lipped. If you did want to go do something out by the airport and buy property, you're probably being quiet about it so prices don't shoot up on you.
Right.
And I did with SoFi Stadium, the one in LA that's Mark's going out to go fix today, apparently.
Yes.
So is like it took them 8 years from when they said, "Hey, we're building,"
Right.
to done.
Yep.
So like you said, in about a decade, I could see them in about 2 years going, "Hey," because once again, they don't want to they want to be able to put the pitch in there if they need to and have the right size for the stadium. They got to get the right engineers.
Yep.
Get people. I'm sure there's NDAs out there that are incredibly tight that says if you talk about this, we're not going to do business with you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I something like this, the scope of what you're doing is not just something that you just do overnight. So
No.
even if your most realistic goal is to start putting shovels in the ground in 8 years, it's a process that starts now. So I just don't think that this ownership group.
Have you ever built a house before?
Yeah, exacally. Yeah.
It's a 2-year process just for a single family dwelling.
Exactly. Now you're talking about a stadium that would be probably upwards of $4 billion or something like that. No, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I don't think that this ownership group came with the idea that we're just simply going to refurbish stuff.
No, and if they know that if it's a decade out, they're going to put $100 million into it. I mean, that's just
nothing.
Yeah. Like what people forget about, what's the value of that stadium right now? Probably, they probably put less than 10% of the cost into it with that $100 million of what that, or even for a new one's $4 billion. So if you did a home renovation and redid your kitchen, doesn't mean you're not moving in 10 years.
Right. Yeah. No, we're in complete lockstep on this. I'd be stunned if we're not 10 years from now, we're not looking forward to the opening of a brand new Palace.
Yep. People get lost in numbers and lose the percentage. It's kind of like the same thing. Like, what's the cost of your quarterback room? What's the cost of your running backs? What's the cost of your wide receivers? Which, by the way, did the Broncos spend too much on their wide receiver room right now too? Is that why they were shopping Judy?
Did they spend too much? No, they just Sean Payton's sending a very clear message that he doesn't like what's in this room. And I think it's a complete rebuke of John Elway and Elway's drafting of Jerry Jeudy and then KJ Hamler. And it's a bit of a rebuke against Cortland Sutton. Although, it's funny, when the Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick deals were done, everybody raved about it. That, hey, you got two really good receivers sort of ahead of the market. And at the time, nobody was really upset with the Sutton and Patrick signings, but the problem was that I think we all expected Sutton to bounce back better from his knee surgery, and he just hasn't been the same guy. So now all of a sudden that contract feels like an albatross. But no,
they
it's
both
very
tear an
clear.
ACL since they went under contract with the new contracts too.
Yeah, so I think it's very clear that Sean Payton just is not into this wide receiver room and would love to upgrade it. Although, but the only thing about it is that on one hand he's not blown away by Jerry Jeudy, but yet on the other hand, he seems to be putting such a prohibitive price tag on Jeudy that it's negating getting deals done, and you're going to be stuck with Jeudy. So, kind of a mixed message there.
Yeah, there's like we said before in other players, there's value, and what do you value? And you value them enough to go, hey, if we're going to get rid of them, we at least want this. It's not just to clear the room. So, one more final question for you. Simple question. It's tax season. So does your CPA let you write off going to games and watching sports and all those? Like, do you get turn in receipts?
Let's see. What have I over the years? So, newspaper.
How about this? Let me start up. Like, if you had to actually pay to go to a sporting event, because I know you get a lot of media passes.
Yeah.
But like, hey, you just want to go experience a sporting event.
Yeah, I would never do that. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. No, because that isn't. I mean, I'm not looking to cheat people, right? I mean, so no, but if I use resources like, I get the Denver Post over the years, I'll tell you one thing I'm going to do, because I am a Comcast guy and I haven't been able to watch the Avalanche and Nuggets. I did pony up for Fubu for this season, and damn well I'm going to write that off because the only reason I have that is for work. So darn right I'm going to get my Fubu tax deduction, that's for sure.
Right. So if my wife and I were talking, 'cause we had YouTube TV, and I was looking at Direct Stream, the Direct TV. Are they going to? What's happening with the Rockies and their altitude and their AT&T network?
I just think we're just look. Do you get Paramount because you want to see Yellowstone? Do you get Prime because you want to see Jack Ryan? A couple of my favorite shows. I think we're just heading.
I would, but I use it for other things.
I think we're heading towards that a la carte shopping, right? Isn't that obvious that that's where we're going? If you want the Avalanche, you want the Nuggets, you'll pay this, and if you want the Rockies, you'll pay this. And I just see that the way it's going.
Absolutely, it's going there, and if it doesn't, it'll be disappointing.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. Like, don't charge if you're going to pay me for that service, and I get that service, fine. But don't make me have to pay for something that I don't want. As part of this giant umbrella. Which benefits Comcast, which I think has also benefited the Rockies and Avalanche over the years, and Nuggets. So just put it on a menu. If I want it, I want it. If I don't want it, I don't need it. I don't have to pay for it. And the teams are going to have to make do with, and hopefully that they're good enough and popular enough that enough people are choosing them on the menu.
So, is the AT&T Sports Network or whatever, is that going to be around this year, like our broadcast games?
So, my understanding is that the actual company, they're going away, but Major League Baseball is going to take over and provide and pay for and make sure that the broadcasts still go out for this year. So, again, the answer to your question is if you're a Rockies fan and you want to watch the games, I don't think it's going to impact you at all this year. Beyond this year, we could be looking at something different.
It's the race to 100.
I think they'll avoid losing 100.
Really?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Only because one of the benefits of playing at Coors Field is you get teams who come in and they just are like, let's get this series over with. Let's not wear out our pitchers. Let's just try to survive, and let's move on to the next place. And I think that the attrition that goes with playing at Coors Field is beneficial enough to the Rockies that they'll be able to pick off enough wins at home to avoid losing 100. I mean, they'll be god awful on the road. I mean, they'll be dreadful on the road again. But they only need to win to avoid 100. They got to go 63 and 99, right? Is that
63 wins?
63 wins is the number. Rockies are good for at least 40 wins at home every year. So I think they'll be able to get that and then scratch out.
What do you think of the new baseball schedule where they're not playing a ton of divisional games anymore?
That'll help too. That will help too. I think that's a great move by baseball.
You get more games against the Tigers.
I don't need to see the Padres 19 times. I don't even the Dodgers. I don't need to see the Dodgers 19 times. So cut it back, and if it means I get to see the Rockies play everybody else in Major League Baseball at least once, and I know that. As a Red Sox fan growing up, I know that they're going to play the Red Sox every year, and every couple of years they're going to be here. That's great. I'd much rather do that than get an extra 6 games against the Dodgers.
Well, I think the schedule is like every 4 years because I'm a Tiger fan growing up in Ohio, like right there an hour south of Detroit. So, by the way, when you're talking about like Cleveland and Detroit teams, like I'm one of those guys. Like I coach basketball. You ever have that kid you coach that finally makes the layup in the game, and sometimes even just shoots it, and you're like, yeah, oh yeah. Like, that's how I am with like I'm not a fan of them, but it's like that empathetic fan. You're like, oh yeah, you can do it, guys. You can do it. Take the shot. You can do it. Oh, you missed, but it was close. A for effort. But it's
but
like
now you'll see the Tigers every year. I mean, they'll play the Tigers every year.
Yeah, no, I'm looking like I always saw Justin Verlander pitch his last game for the Tigers in Coors Field.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, Mike, any last thoughts here? I know we talked a while. We covered a lot of things. I always want to make sure I give you a chance to sort of say anything you might have missed.
No, I think we're good. And look, anything that we left out, let's address it the next time. All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk more baseball, basketball with you sometime in the future.
Hey, baseball, no matter what they say about baseball, baseball's got me. They don't have to worry about me. They got me. So I always enjoy talking baseball. The World Baseball Classic, the new rules, that's a whole nother conversation we could have.
You know what's getting my family interested in baseball again?
Getting rid of the shift?
Oh yeah, my 14-year-old niece hated the shift.
I hate the shift. I hate
like, she wrote a paper again. No, the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah. Do you like them?
Oh, I love it. Like
yeah.
I hope they do more touring. I hope they come to places that, and they actually play real baseball. I mean, obviously more entertaining baseball, but like it's not like the Harlem Globetrotters. Like us, they're playing the Generals. Right. The Generals will lose. They're playing baseball in fun ways.
What's the one rule that they have that you would love to see come to Major League Baseball? Mine is that if a player hits a foul ball and the fan catches it, the batter's out.
That would be a fun one.
How cool would that be?
That would be. Well, you may know more about it than I do, but I remember seeing that if a player walks, he can go as far until like every person on the field touches the baseball.
That's good. I like
that because it keeps everybody involved. All of a sudden, everyone's got to touch it. All of a sudden, that guy that was chasing butterflies in right field, all of a sudden, like, oh, the ball's coming to me.
I don't want him to go all the way to that extreme, but even though I am a 40-year baseball fan, okay, and I love the tradition of baseball, but I'm not married to it. And this is a sport that desperately needs to have some fresh air, blown into it. And that's why I think some of the changes that they made this year with the pitch clock and eliminating the shift makes a lot of sense to me. I'd keep looking for ways to just breathe new life into baseball, and they'll always have me. So you can find the way to get a mix of the tradition that's going to appeal to the old school and still appeal to new fans as well. I think you can do it. People will complain about it, but they'll come around. They'll come around.
I got my 14-year-old niece interested in baseball.
Good for you.
I took her to a Rockies game, day game, front row, like third base. And I could see she was kind of like, meh. Then I opened my DraftKings app.
Yeah.
I go, what do you think this bat is going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I go, we'll
Hey,
put $1 on it.
I have a 16-year-old son who came to me last year. Hey, can we go to a game? So what self-respecting dad is going to say no? I mean, immediately got tickets, went down on a Wednesday afternoon, saw the Rockies and White Sox play. Great day at the ballpark. I don't ever want to snuff out that kind of passion for the game. I mean, baseball has enough problems finding 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds who are interested in baseball. If they show an interest, we have to move heaven and earth to make sure we get them out to a ball game.
No, absolutely. I did hear that baseball's resurgence is the micro betting.
Yeah. Hey, why is the NFL popular? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The NFL has become the juggernaut that it is because it's an easy sport to bet on. It always has been.
Yep.
So if you can find and tap into that idea that, yeah, within the course of a game, you can bet on whether or not it's going to be a 1-2-3 inning or there's going to be a run scored, all of a sudden, you're into it, right? You're invested. You are invested.
Oh, yeah. So,
And if you have to ride the betting coattails to get it done, hey, again, plenty of other sports have done it, and they don't apologize for it.
yeah. My brother rolled his eyes at me, but I'm like, hey, we got her interested in math and baseball. So,
Right.
hey.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you're welcome. Uncle of the Year. So,
Yeah. By the way, I love your T-shirt.
oh, thank you.
I love that show. How do you feel about the first couple of episodes? I was not happy with the first episode. I was kind of a slow start to the season, but episode number 2 I felt a lot better about.
I was actually listening to you. I think was it today or yesterday. I had you on while I was making breakfast for my wife, and you mentioned that exact.
Yeah.
And my wife, because we watched it, and we only watched the first episode, which was okay.
Yeah.
It was like, but it wasn't one of those you're like, So like we haven't watched the second one yet.
All right.
So
I think you'll like it. It feels better, but you can definitely tell. Could you tell that they're kind of greasing the skids for this to be the last show? I think Sudeikis has already said this is going to be the last year of it.
It makes like it's a subject where you go like, how many times can you go back to the well?
Yeah. But I have heard that they are talking about spinoffs.
Oh, I'm sure.
Spinoffs on this show, which I'm fine. Take one of the other characters, take Roy Kent and build a show around Roy Kent. I'm fine with that.
Well, they've also developed great characters. Like, I mean, Ted Lasso, if you do screen time on there, I'd be like on a 30-minute show.
Yeah.
He's really not on there all that much.
Which is, you can tell they're kind of greasing the skids. So yeah,
it's interesting on what they're going with that. I'm a fan of how things work behind the scenes. So now you got my brain working on that one. So thanks for that distraction this afternoon.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
I'll challenge you to come up with the 5 characters that they could build a spinoff on around.
Oh, clearly, like the assistant coach, the new. I don't know all the character names, so
Right.
forget. But like the coach, the coach that went
left.
to the other team,
Yeah.
he could come back and be the new Ted Lasso, along with the
assistant.
assistant. Yep,
Roy Kent,
yep.
the owner, the lady owner, maybe, and maybe that's about it. So.
Well, if I was a writer, I would set it up where like Roy becomes the next head coach, and then Ted Lasso's more of just like you see him on FaceTime a few times, going like, "Hey, you can just give him like the Ted Lasso comments."
Yeah.
Where it's like it's more Roy than Roy a few words and the assistant coach a few words, and then they can always then bring in another assistant coach then to sort of add some spice to it. But
I don't know if it'll work. It probably wouldn't work, but I'd love to see him try. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's a fun show. It's one of those surprise finds when they made it, and you're like, oh, because especially like I coach basketball, so like every coach I know is quoting it in some way.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so funny because it really is the power of word of mouth. Because when that show was out for a solid year and had won awards before we even sampled it, and it's just. There's so much good TV out there. You get onto one show and you want to see that show through, but we got onto it and it was instant hit. We loved it.
So on that point, because I love the business of radio. Like, how does that impact with what you guys do at the Fan, where you guys are a live event going on and you're competing with like my podcast, arguably, other podcasts, your own podcasts. and then on-demand entertainment compared to 15 years ago, if I wanted to, or whenever, 20 years ago when I was graduating high school and Seinfeld was ending,
Right.
if I want to watch Seinfeld, we got to be watching NBC at 8 o'clock on a Thursday.
It's a challenge. It really is true. There's a new media.
Yeah.
There's a new frontier of media out there, and you have to adapt to it. And we're trying to adapt to it. Much more digital podcasts. Yeah, we want you, the great listener, to listen to us live while you're in your car. And there's still a ton of cars out there, and people are listening on their radio. But we also understand that especially coming out of COVID, a lot of people's work habits, when they wake up, things like that, changed a lot. And so, we're happy. Like a lot of times, Schlereth and I, our show will have, in the course of 1 month, we'll have 165,000 downloads. So,
Oh, wow.
So it's one of those things like, yeah, we'd love for you to listen to us live, but if you're waiting until 1 o'clock in the afternoon to listen to our show, like I've I've had times where I'll be outside grilling dinner at like 6 o'clock, and one of my neighbors will drive by, and he'll roll down the window. He goes, "Hey, I'm listening to your podcast. I'm up to the point where you had Troy Rank on." And that was at like 6:45, and they're listening to the show then. I'm like, hey, best is yet to come.
Right?
Keep listening.
Yes. It's like a band member rolling up on a car next to them playing their song.
Right,
It's like,
right.
This is,
But it's just a different. It's just a different media now, and there's so many different ways for people to listen, and we have to be aware of that. Otherwise, we'd be crazy. And I think we're doing a good job of that as a radio station. Expanding our shows through different platforms. With the idea that people continue to watch and listen and digest it however they want to.
No, absolutely. No, it's an interesting dilemma you guys are facing. But I think you guys are at least doing it the right way with like focusing on local and the big local stuff. If you got in the weeds with, the Mammoth are a fun team to watch, but if you did a breakdown of the Mammoth every day.
Well, the beauty of sports is, and believe me, I thank my lucky stars that I'm not a radio FM DJ, because that's tough, man. That is tough.
With voice tracking, these guys are recording shows from different cities.
But if there's still two formats that you would think still have a long shelf life, and if you're looking to get into this business and you're looking down the road, local sports talk and local news. That's as the local element, the live and local part is still. I don't think that's ever going to change.
No, you can't, because you can't get that anywhere else.
Right.
And you guys can react to stuff as it's coming out. If I'm listening to your podcast, but news broke.
Right.
So.
Right.
No. Well, Mike Evans, I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate you going longer than I expected. So I appreciate your time. I think you're cracking your 7th hour of broadcast, or at least recording.
I'm just warming up, man.
So thank you so much.
Let's do this again sometime. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.